Greetings, everyone! Tonight, a trans video game review. And we'll wrap up Trans History Month with more tales from the community. Good news starts right now! Welcome to the Trans Trail, a retro video game by Fallon Fox, done in the style of Oregon Trail. And not just for nostalgia, but a very good reason, because the objective of this game is to not die for 5 years. As a person whose mantra basically is, try not to die, this struck me as interesting. Also, I'm a big nerd for retro video games, but this one, oh goodness, like the original Oregon Trail, there's a whole lot of ways to die, and we're gonna try our best not to. Let's check it out. So we begin with an opening screen, general store. We've got $2,000 to try to survive our 5 years. What can we buy? We can buy pepper spray to help defend against attackers in violent situations. We can get self-defense classes, training to increase survival during violent encounters. Yeah, violence comes up kind of a lot when you're a trans person. Ask me how I know. You can get 1 year of hormone supply. It only gives you 12 months of hormone access, but it'll help increase your progress. You can get a 5-pack of therapy sessions, which could, it restores mental health when feeling depressed. Mental health is a statistic. It's one of your stats you have to keep an eye on over the course of the game. And with good reason, because mental health decline is one of the chief ways that trans people lose the game, so to speak. You could get legal aid membership to help fight job and housing discrimination, because that's a real thing in the United States. Ask me how I know. You can have emergency fund savings to help prevent homelessness by covering unexpected expenses. That hugely useful. There's always something that comes up, and things can be a little unstable, especially when you're dealing with both job and housing insecurity. Voice training to help improve job prospects and reduce dysphoria. Hugely useful if you can get it. You can voice train on your own, to be clear, but this is for the purposes of the game. Support group membership increases social support by connecting with peers. Again, hugely useful. Feeling alone and isolated is another one of the big problems. It decreases our mental health. And surgery fund, because in the United States, access to necessary life-saving medical care often is whoever can afford it, and tough luck to the rest. So, what should we get? $2,000. Cool. We can't afford everything. What do we need? Well, we're definitely gonna need the legal aid, and therapy sessions could literally save our lives. We need hormones. And self-defense classes might come in very, very useful. That drops us to $1,100. So let's put some away for surgery. That leaves us with $100. What can we get? Voice training. Boom, voice training. There and $0. You can't even buy the minimum of what you need for 1 year, which is kind of accurate. All right, let's see how we do. Now, like Oregon Trail, what happens each month is randomly generated. First month, we're at 100 health, 100 mental health, 0% transition progress, and we've got $200. But we do have our lovely inventory up there. Okay, a local gender clinic closes due to restrictive legislation, reducing your access to care. Awesome! Our options are travel to another state, use unsafe black market options, or go on without professional care for now. And that's a real problem. That's a thing that people in many, many states have to face in the United States. Boop, no medical care for you. What do? Black market? No care? Go to another state. What do you do? Well, since our object is to survive and hopefully transition, as an added goal, I suppose, let's travel to another state for care. You secure treatment elsewhere at greater expense and emotional cost, and our mental health has decreased, and our money is now negative $700. Holy shit. We're up to negative $500, but we have 5% transition progress, and we gained a point back in mental health. A religious organization denies you services because you are trans. Of course they do. What a very Christian thing to do. So, our options: file a discrimination complaint, boycott and tell your friends, or just accept it quietly. This is a bit of a tricky one because religious organizations aren't covered by a lot of the same rules that other nonprofits are, or other businesses are, for example. They have a lot of wiggle room for religious exemptions if they can demonstrate that their religion actually demands a certain practice, and they're not just using their religion as a shield for their bigotry. It'll be different for everybody. Me personally, I'm feeling litigious today, so let's file a discrimination complaint. The process is draining and costs money. Because of course it does. You can't do anything with the legal system unless you pay to play. Because this is the United States, baby. Yay, capitalism! So our mental health has gone down, and we have less money. We're even more negative money on month number 2. This is amazing. Month 3, we're recovering some financially. We've gained a point back in mental health. You develop complications after surgery that need follow-up care. Fuck. This is just a regular surgery, because in addition to transitioning, you have to live regular life also side by side, and sometimes things happen, like you need a surgery for regular reasons. Ask me how I know. And things come up. So what do? Seek medical care or wait it out and hope it improves? Considering our money situation, I would love to use the surgery fund for this, because it's not transition surgery, but it's surgery related, but I don't think the game will let me. So I'm gonna say wait it out and hope it improves, because unfortunately that's what I have to do for a lot of medical things in my life. Personally speaking, you should not do this. It is unsafe, but that's what I'm gonna do for the purposes of this game. Your condition worsens and you regret delaying care, and our health dropped to 49. Which is super relatable. But this isn't even a trans person thing. It's a thing trans people deal with on top of everything else. It's a poor person thing. Because anybody could be subject to that exact situation and have the exact same outcome. You interview for a job and must decide whether to disclose your trans identity. This is another one of those very, very personal things, because you don't have to disclose. No one is entitled to your medical information. Even if you go see a new doctor, they need your permission to access your past medical files. Now, you probably want your doctor to know your health information so they can take care of you properly, but they're not entitled to it. No one is entitled to your medical information. If you choose to disclose, do so for your reasons, not because you feel like you have to. So in this case, disclose your identity up front or keep it private. Now, there are consequences either way. If you disclose up front, you may not get the job because employment discrimination. But if you keep it private, it may come out later and you could end up with a lot of various kinds of trouble. For the purposes of this game, I'm going to say keep it private, because it is nobody's business. You get the job, but constantly fear being outed. Mental health goes down, because even though discrimination against trans people is technically prohibited by constitutional law and Supreme Court rulings, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Many states, including mine, have laws that specifically enumerate transgender status, identity, and so forth as protected characteristics. But it still happens. Ask me how I know. Okay, month 5. Our money is feeling a little better now. We're up to $325. Our mental health is ticking up, but our regular health is still stuck at 49. You must travel to see a gender specialist out of state. Of course we do. Fly and stay in a hotel? Ha, money bags. Drive and stay with friends, or cancel the appointment. So yeah, let's do it the cheap way. Drive and stay with friends. And it wasn't that cheap. We're in the negative again. Awesome! You save money, but the long drive is tiring. And our mental health went down too. Oh goodness. Okay, month 6. 6 months. Our money's back into the positive, barely. Things are not looking great. A police officer stops you without cause and questions your gender. Again, this is a thing that happens. We've reported on it in this show. So what do? Comply with it and hope it ends quickly, ask why you were stopped, or record the interaction. Oh boy, this is going to have negative consequences no matter what we do, as is often the case in real-life situations. I would record the interaction no matter what else happens, because then there's a record of the interaction. Recording provides documentation, but heightens the tensions. Of course it does. And our mental health is down to 28. But we're still surviving. Month 7. Your neighbor sets fire to a pride flag outside your home. Should we confront them and call the authorities? I mean, call the authorities. Yeah, the person is setting fire to things. Ignore it and replace the flag, or take down the flag and stay silent. And this is similar to the first thing, right? Like, do we just let them get away with it? Do we let them get away with it in a different way by just replacing the flag? Or do we take direct action and put ourselves at risk for it? For this game, I'm going to stick with my litigious course and call the authorities. But I know the confrontation is gonna suck. The confrontation is scary and exhausting. Of course. And our mental health is down to 12. Month 18. You're offered an earlier gender-affirming surgery date if you pay out of pocket. This could be expensive. We do have some money. But we also have our surgery fund. So let's pay the additional cost now and see what happens. You pay extra, have the surgery earlier, and feel relieved. We didn't use the surgery fund for some reason, and we're at negative $975, but our transition progress went up to 25%. Hooray! Oh, but Mr. Man here is here to, like, ruin our day, so I guess we were too much in the negative. Which is unfortunate, because we actually had a surgery fund. Oh, goodness. Okay, so this whole thing is really long, so I'm going to put a few highlights into the weekly broadcast, and I'll put the whole thing up on the backlog channel, Transpositive News. If you want to watch, it'll be over there. The game itself, The Trans Trail, the web address is really long and not friendly to remembering. It's 68991616 F0BED07833533154F grand KLEPON 165E52 .netlify.app. Good luck with that. So I have linked to it on my website, betterthanember.com, under the resources tab. At the bottom of additional trans resources, you can find The Trans Trail. For your convenience, if you would like to play, see if you can do better than me, see if you can make it all 60 months. And good luck! You might find a lot of relatable things in it. And if you're not a trans person, even though it's a video game version of things, it might still help you gain some perspective on what it feels like to be one of us.
One of the earliest transgender millionaires ever took his pet leopard on his private planes and almost single-handedly funded the early gay and trans liberation movements in America. You need to meet Reed Erickson, a philanthropist, 3-time divorcee, fugitive, and the subject of this week's Queer History. Reed was born in 1917 and started using the name Eric only around his circle of lesbian friends while attending the Philadelphia High School for Girls. He was an excellent student, eventually becoming the first person assigned female at birth to graduate from LSU's School of Engineering. Erickson's father passed away in 1962, and Reed finally began to live as his authentic self, beginning his gender transition in 63 with Dr. Harry Benjamin. In 64, Reed founded the Erickson Educational Foundation, one of the world's first organizations specifically for trans rights. Prior to the Stonewall riots, the EEF was the only grant provider specifically for LGBTQ+ issues. The foundation focused on providing medical funding for and public education on transgender people. It funded early studies of gender transitioning at Stanford and Johns Hopkins University, and financed what would later become the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. Erickson knew that awareness of trans people was extremely limited, and acceptance could only be achieved by a sense of familiarity and recognition via education. The foundation produced short films, radio pieces, and literature that they presented at church groups, colleges, and professional meetings. He also wanted to push the boundaries of science beyond what humans thought was possible at this time, sometimes via the use of hallucinogenics and other substances, which would eventually become a huge problem for him down the line. Reed was one of the earliest and the most significant donor to the first national organization furthering gay rights in the U.S., One Inc. However, Erickson had a huge public falling out with him after a property dispute turned ugly. He underwent sexual reassignment surgeries in 1965 and finally found peace within his body, but he didn't become complacent. He always used his influence and riches to help other trans people access the care they needed. I will say most of the people who were able to access this care were middle to upper class white people who experienced gender dysphoria in almost the exact same symptomatic way that Erickson did, which left a lot of people out in the cold, but still, this was a remarkable feat. Erickson married Daisy Lewis in 1963, divorced her in 64, married Eileen Ashton in 65, with whom he had 2 children. He moved to Mexico in 1973 to a mansion Reed nicknamed the Lovejoy Palace. They divorced the next year. This was when Reed started to personally experiment with drugs, leading to a massive substance abuse issue in a very short time, which took a toll on his mental and physical health, ruining a lot of his relationships. The foundation was even dissolved in 1975 because of internal disputes. In 77, he married a woman named Eva, and they moved to California to be closer to Erickson's children. Their marriage fell apart sometime between 1983 and 1985. In 1983, he returned to Mexico as a fugitive on drug charges. Oh, and about the leopard, his name was Henry, and he liked to play with other house cats. Reed took him on walks around their Baton Rouge neighborhood, much to the neighbors' shock. It's unclear when and how he acquired Henry, but they were apparently best friends, and Henry never ate him. So, good for them? He married for one final time in 1987, but his drug addiction had ruined his health. Reed's daughter Monica was appointed as his conservator, and Erickson passed away in 1992 at the age of 74. Sociologist Aaron H. Dever once wrote that Erickson shaped almost every aspect of work being done in the 1960s and 70s in the field of gender affirmation in the U.S. Reed Erickson is the reason transgender folks are so widely recognized in the U.S. and abroad. He was an extraordinarily complicated man whose privilege, pocketbook, and heart put us in the place we are today, and his work is not done. As of 2017, only 28 cents out of every $100 awarded by foundations goes to LGBTQ+ issues. So let's pick up his torch. I love you. I'll see you next week.
We've only got a few days left here on TikTok, which means I have neither the time nor the desire to be polite about this. So let's do the thing that you should have done before leaving this brainless comment and learn some science. This is an introductory biology textbook called Campbell Biology Concepts and Connections, and it is the newest edition. This is the kind of textbook used in freshman-level Intro to Bio for non-majors classes, or even advanced high school students. This is, literally, basic biology. And here in Chapter 9, we get this section over sex chromosomes and differentiation. The biochemical, physiological, and anatomical features associated with males and females are turning out to be more complex than previously realized, with many genes involved in their development. We now know that sex is not a binary state with just 2 defined outcomes. Because of the complexity of the genes and proteins involved in sex determination, many variations exist. Some individuals are born with intermediate sexual or intersex characteristics, or even with anatomical features that do not match an individual's sense of their own gender, known as transgender individuals. Sex determination is an active area of research that should yield more sophisticated results in years to come. And down here on the bottom of the page, we even get a little pop quiz. Does the development of ovaries necessarily mean that a human has 2 X chromosomes? No! But again, that's just basic biology. We need something a little bit more advanced to match your staggering intellect. So let's take a look at this genetics textbook. In fact, this is the same brand of genetics textbook that I used to get my first biology degree. Only this one is the 7th edition, which is actually a newer edition than the one that I use. So this is even better than my undergrad training. Up here you can see they are also talking about intersex people, in this case someone who is genetically female and phenotypically male, but that's not the point of this video. The point here is this paragraph. Gender is not the same as sex. Biological sex refers to the anatomical and physiological phenotype of an individual. Gender is a category assigned by the individual or others based on behavioral and cultural practices. One's gender need not coincide with one's biological sex. If there's one thing that I know about people who use laughing emojis in place of an argument, is that they really need things spelled out for them. So let's look at just one more source, this time the World Health Organization's page on gender and health. Gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. Gender interacts with, but is different from sex, which refers to the different biological and physiological characteristics of males, females, and intersex persons, such as chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive organs. You know, the exact thing that I was saying on the video where you left this shitty comment. So when you say that gender is the same thing as sex, and that there isn't a single person on the planet who believes that gender is a social construct, what you actually mean is, you believe those things, and so you assume that all the biologists and doctors in the world are all just wrong. Because if there's one thing that unites transphobes, flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, creationists, and every other kind of science denier, it's that they cannot tell the difference between their own ignorance and scientific evidence. I'll be putting out a long-form video over on this platform by the end of this month about sex, gender, why they're different, and why neither is binary, so please make sure that you're subscribed over here, especially with TikTok going down the drain. This is where I put in my best work. I'll see you over there.
Trans fact of the day. The bathroom predator myth is made up. Of course it is. How absurd to think people would go through years of treatment, change all their government documents, deal with endless strings of doctors, not to mention hate from the public, among other things, just to walk into a room that nobody is stopping them from entering in the first place. It's pure, irrational fear-mongering, and it only persists because fear makes people act irrationally. But you all know it's nonsense propaganda. What you might not know is that a known hate group confessed to making it up. In 2018, Massachusetts voters overwhelmingly opted to keep in place an existing civil rights law that protected citizens from discrimination, including trans people. On November 9th of that year, an organization called Mass Resistance, identified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, published an article decrying the right's failures to legalize hate against trans people, as well as to prevent gay marriage from becoming legal, and rounded it out with this gem of a statement. Quote, "Our side concocted the bathroom safety male predator argument as a way to avoid an uncomfortable battle over LGBT ideology and still fire up people's emotion." They went on to lament that right-wing hate groups and their wealthy donors would keep on losing the battle to control everyone's lives and to hurt people without consequences unless they're willing to change their tactics. In short order, they'd pivot to pretending trans people in sports was somehow the end of the world, but that's another fact for another day. For right now, just be aware that the hate groups themselves admit this bathroom issue is fabricated entirely and have said so publicly, and we've known that for years. Follow for more.
The first 2 documented cases of teens receiving gender-affirming care in the United Kingdom are brothers Mark and David Farrow in the 1930s. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. Mark and David were born in 1922 and 1924, respectively, and assigned female at birth. They grew up in the seaside town of Great Yarmouth in a family of 5 children. Their father, George, was a bookseller, and their mother, Ellen, was a homemaker. By all accounts, they had a happy and unremarkable childhood. The brothers each transitioned socially when they were about 13. The story that was told about them in the newspapers is that Mark and David's voices dropped when they entered puberty, leaving them, quote, withdrawn and bewildered. Now, it is entirely possible that Mark and David were intersex and that puberty enhanced some of their more masculine physical features. However, being intersex was also a requirement for accessing gender-affirming care in England in the 1930s, so this could also just be a plausible cover story. Unfortunately, the 2,000-word piece that Mark wrote about his childhood and transition has been lost to time, so we'll never know for sure. What we do know for sure is that Mark and David were raised and socialized as girls, and by the time they were 13, they were able to clearly articulate that they were and always had been boys. The Farrow family supported Mark and David completely, but their classmates were a little more, let's say, skeptical. So much so that Mark actually left school for about a year and a half after he started his transition. George and Ellen thought that a new environment would make their transitions easier. So, thanks to the generosity of a neighbor who paid travel, living, and medical expenses, Mark and David were sent to art school in Maidstone, which was 150 miles away. And it was also only about 35 miles away from London, where they would have access to what we would now call gender-affirming care. Mark started hormone therapy when he was 17, and David started a year later when he was about 16. There's also a note in this Daily Mirror article that says Mark underwent surgery at a London hospital as part of his transition, but we don't have any more details. This article is part of the nationwide splash that Mark and David made when they returned to Great Yarmouth as brothers. And what's interesting about all of this coverage is that it is very positive. Their transition is framed as an example of groundbreaking modern medicine, and all of the quotes from neighbors are about how much they admire the boys' courage. Coverage of the Farrow brothers' return to Great Yarmouth ended abruptly, however, because the United Kingdom entered World War II just a week later. Mark and David Farrow both went on to live long and happy lives. Mark and his trademark pipe eventually settled in Leicester, where he worked as a writer and an artist, and where he served for many years on the Leicester Marriage Guidance Council. He himself was happily married to a woman named Edna for almost 50 years, and they died 6 months apart in 1991. David, on the other hand, stayed in Great Yarmouth and became a beloved elder of the community. He followed in his father's footsteps and became a bookseller, eventually opening a store near the town center that stocked 30,000 titles. Though he couldn't find information about a spouse, he did have a daughter named Jan. He died in 2006 at the age of 82. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.
But I happen to believe that there are actual superheroes in real life who walk among us. And these superheroes are called trans people. Because just like superheroes, trans people are born with something special and magical about them, and they often have to hide what's special and magical about them from other people. Like superheroes, they grow up in a society that doesn't understand them, that makes them the other and often hates them. Like superheroes, trans people just want the world to be a safer place, and they believe we should protect each other and live our lives in peace. Like superheroes, evil billionaires want to get rid of trans people for no reason whatsoever. And just like superheroes, trans people are not new. They've been around forever and they're not going anywhere, no matter how much this administration tries to make you fear them.
You may know Marsha P. Johnson as the black trans woman who threw the first brick or shot glass or punch at the Stonewall riots, but that's not her real story, which is why today's Queer History is the biography of Marsha P. Marsha was born to a religious family in New Jersey in 1945 and began wearing dresses at only 5 years old. However, she had to stop due to bullying and even violence by her peers. But the second she graduated from high school, she took $15 and a single bag of clothes and moved to New York City, where she changed her name to Marsha P. Johnson, with the P standing for Pay It No Mind. Here she was finally able to present as she always had dreamed, wearing fun, colorful clothing and often wearing a flower crown. Like many trans people, Marsha struggled to find employment and turned to sex work to make ends meet. She faced violence at the hands of her clients and police and even survived being shot. She was also homeless, something that would influence her work for the rest of her life. Marsha eventually began waitressing and doing drag performances, which quickly improved her life. This is where she met 11-year-old Sylvia Rivera, a Puerto Rican trans girl who quickly became Marsha's best friend. 6 years after their meeting on June 28, 1969, Marsha and Sylvia arrived at the Stonewall Inn at about 2 a.m. And here's a clip of Marsha's recollection of the evening.
I was uptown. I didn't get downtown until about 2 o'clock, because when I got downtown, the place was already on fire and it was a raid already.
After a lifetime of brutality and unkindness, Marcia and other trans folks felt they had nothing more to lose and let their anger take over. Marcia herself said that she'd spent 10 years in jail just for wearing makeup on 42nd Street, so fighting the cops wasn't a terrible thing to do. The days following the Stonewall Uprising were full of protests, with many planned by Marcia and Sylvia themselves. The very first gay pride parade took place in New York in 1970, and Marcia was initially part of the planning committee, along with the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Activist Alliance, but she denounced their work because it was mostly focused on white gay people, leaving out trans people of color. The same year, 1970, Marcia and Sylvia started STAR, the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, quote, an organization dedicated to sheltering young transgender individuals who were shunned by their families. Throughout the 1970s, Marcia rose to prominence within the LGBTQ+ community. She performed with the drag group The Hot Peaches, and she was featured in an Andy Warhol print series called Ladies and Gentlemen. Marcia's activism knew no bounds, and in one interview she said, "As long as gay people don't have their rights all across America, there is no reason for celebration." Because of her work, Marcia rode in the lead car of the 1980 Gay Pride Parade.
You never completely have your rights one person until you all have your rights.
However, the 1970s were also a very difficult time for Marcia personally. She experienced several mental health crises leading to hospitalization, and she was forced to return to sex work as advocacy is not a particularly profitable lifestyle. In 1990, Marcia was diagnosed with HIV, which she turned into yet another advocacy opportunity, stating how the world should not be afraid of her community because of this disease.
And if I die, I hope nobody cries either. I hope you stand up and dance, party, and have a good time.
Marcia was found dead in the Hudson River July 6, 1992. Police ruled it a suicide, but her friends suspected foul play, as 1992 was the worst year for queer violence on record up to that point. Hundreds of people showed up to Marcia's funeral, which was held at a church, as she remained religious for the entirety of her life. So many people came to celebrate the beautiful life of this woman that they had to stand out on the sidewalk to celebrate the passing of this titan in our community. She has since been memorialized in many ways, but the best tribute that you and I can give to Marcia is to continue the work that she began. For the rest of our lives, and especially for the next 4 years, we must pay it no mind and continue to fight for the liberation and protection of trans folks of color in our community. I love you. Have a beautiful day.
If you enjoy content like this, be sure to subscribe. Transpositions Weekly is the first and only weekly trans news show in the universe, and we need your support to keep this show going. Contribute at patreon.com/thetranspositions. Spread the word all over social media to let people know we're here, and tell us what stories matter to you by joining the community on Discord. Discord, of course, is where the memes live, and our meme of the week was posted by Bumblebee. And if you are an irresistible creature who stalks the night, inspiring terror in the hearts of mortals, join us. Also, if you have good news concerning trans people you'd like to see reported on, you can tell us about that in the Discord as well. For the Transpositions, I've been Ember Belrad.